So, as always, sitting comfortably, sit up in your chair, rubbing your hands together, and then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Onto one shoulder and your arm. And on the other side. Onto your chest. The belly. And the legs. Right. Settle back. Just listen yourself sink into the chair. Take a couple of breaths deliberately. So using that to just draw your attention into your body. So this is helping us to come to terms with what is in many ways a sort of absolutely fundamental process in these arts. The settling in, quietening, whatever label you care to put on it, really. One term that is often used, that you've probably heard me talk about before, is the one of letting go. And it's not one that I will often use because I think it's often misused. I think it can sometimes be used in a way, often used in a way, where it suggests that, oh, you just let that go and then it's sorted. And that's not really what I'm talking about. The letting go is a process. All of these things are processes. They're verbs, not nouns, shall we say. So rather than thinking, if you've got a tight shoulder, or if you're being distracted by something you're thinking about, well, I'll just let that go and then it's sorted. It doesn't really work like that. But it is an interesting thing to consider, and has an impact on all aspects of what we do. While you're sitting there, consider this as an idea, an image. If you get a stone, if you're on the beach or something like that, and you pick up a stone or a rock and it's a bit jagged and things like that, if you grip it in your hand and you grip it really tightly, it cuts into your skin, the fingers get tight, it feels uncomfortable, and so on and so forth. If on the other hand we can just release that grip, then a lot of that will change. The stone is still there significantly. So this isn't so much about getting rid of the stone, although that may be an outcome later. But initially, it's about the way that we respond to that stone. And it's not meant to be, in this sense, a kind of final solution. So we don't, it's not a case of, oh, I tried to let that go and couldn't. It's the process of letting go that actually helps. It means that we begin to cease to add to the discomfort of or the distraction or whatever. But in terms of the body, if you've got that stiff shoulder or awkward knee or something like that, the letting go helps to stop us contributing to that, shall we say. And instead, it opens up the possibility of sorting it out, of healing. But that isn't what I'm actually talking about at the moment. So we begin to reconsider our responses. And if you come to the upright position, most fundamentally of all, what we're doing is letting go to the pull of gravity, rather than sitting up trying to, well, I'm going to sit up straight and this is going to be my posture and so on and so forth. We feel the pull of gravity working through our body, and we just allow it to work through. We don't just give in to it, because we know that when, for instance, our rib cage and our shoulders drop and our hips drop. We're still upright, and we feel that inner quality, those inner strengths, I suppose you could call them, that we find in Tai Chi. So the release of the resistance to the pull of gravity actually reveals something underneath, but significantly, gravity is still there. Otherwise, I'd have disappeared, wouldn't I? I'd have floated up to the ceiling. So this process of letting go is one that relates to what I was talking about before, about these punctuation points, because although ideally, I suppose, in the perfect world, we'll be able to maintain that attitude, that approach the whole time. In practice, we tend to lose it in the transition from one movement to another. But those punctuation points, those moments when we find that stillness, are moments when we can again get that sense of release. The reason I like this image is because if, say, you're sitting there, try it. Just as you sit there, deliberately pull your lower and carefully pull your lower back tight, and then think about that feeling of releasing that you would get in your hand, and see if you can produce that same feeling of releasing in your hips. It's not a complicated process, but it isn't always very easy, because you can be sitting there, and I do it all the time. I'm teaching a class, I'm doing my own practice, suddenly realize for some reason I've got a shoulder up there or something like that. Our bodies begin to tell us, become more aware of that. So it's related to this point of punctuation in terms of coming back to something, that stillness, or again various labels associated with it. It's also something we can use to start to begin a process of managing that stiff back, or again whatever it happens to be. So just applying that idea insofar as it works for you, feeling your weight in your hips and a little bit in your feet, and then just beginning to turn your head. So I'm not going to recommend it for this movement, but we apply the movements in less. So the reason I'm not recommending it in this particular movement is because it's potentially an awkward movement, because when we turn, we risk putting pressure on the side of the neck, and that's where the carotid artery is. It's not a good idea to put pressure on the arteries. So with this particular one, we're not necessarily concerned about range of movement, but we are concerned with mobilization. And if within the range of movement that you've got, without that sense of pulling, there's a kind of resistance, then maybe we can apply that sense of letting go there. And then hands in front of your shoulders. What we can start to do when we become familiar with the process is recognize that at a certain point in any movement, you're going to begin to approach that point of resistance. Now I can bring my elbows to there and then there. If I want to go up any higher, I can feel that tightening beginning across my back, in my shoulders, and so on and so forth. But again, I just try and let go in my back, in my shoulders. And sometimes, not all the time, I find that I get more movement there. So this process of letting go, releasing, is one of the ways that we can work with the idea of extending our range of movement. Change direction. So having said which, it's not necessarily a primary aim, but I think it's good to feel that we can gradually and gently cultivate a larger range of movement for ourselves. I think that's a reasonable thing to have as an aim, as long as we recognize that that we wouldn't do it in the way that would normally be thought of as doing it. We're not trying to stretch or to push hard or anything like that. Hence the emphasis on the letting go. Hands down to your sides and just rotating your arms. Part of what helps us to recognize the need for letting go is that simple awareness that comes out of the focusing of our attention, what we might refer to, or sometimes refer to as that element of Tai Chi that relates to mindfulness. And then winding around. Notice whether in the last few moments or last couple of minutes, you've again sort of gone back to this thing of pulling yourself up. And once again, you let go. Don't see it as a failure. Don't see it as somehow, oh, I'm no good at this. Just see that the fact that you've recognized that as a positive thing. Going back the other way. And then just recognize it again if it's happened again. Old habits die hard. But they're not life sentences. And this is the important thing, that regardless of what the habit is or its cause, there's always potential for change there. Rest your hands down. And then easing forwards and pushing back. That potential for change has always been, in a way, a kind of act of faith in arts like Tai Chi and various other traditions. I think more recently, that kind of faith has been reinforced by scientific research in neuroscience, and the discoveries made about the plasticity of the brain and the nervous system. That habits are embedded in our nervous system. They've been wired in, they've been hardwired. But we know that we can change that. The evidence is out there to support it, regardless of the habit. It's not going to go away necessarily, but it might not be quite so dominant. We can get some space from it. We're not being pulled around by it. As you go forwards, we want to feel that sense of releasing in our hips, moderating the amount that we're moving, stabilizing ourselves. And when we do that, as we go forward, our head is going forward, but the base of the spine is staying behind because of the action of the hips. And so we get that lengthening and contraction. We start to recognize the pulse of the movement, not just in a very broad sense, forwards, backwards, but in this very subtle extension and contraction in our spine. So once again, the letting go element is an essential part of this process of what we might call investigation, understanding. Turn a little bit. And then in the other direction. And then round. So one way that we use that releasing, letting go feeling is when we reach the boundaries, the soft boundary of the movements. in the other direction. Good, and then step out. Again, have you sort of suddenly stiffened up in the upper part of the body? Have your hips somehow got to a point where they're almost lifting off the chair? And then on the other side. Okay. So think of releasing, of letting go, almost like one of these many sort of computer processes that are you're watching on some kind of digital device, and there's always things going on underneath the surface, and they're really important for the overall effect. And sometimes you might want to focus your attention on, as I am focusing on the letting go, but we want to develop it as a more positive habit, as something that we might do as naturally as, you know, you might bite your fingernails, or, you know, just all these little things that we do in our lives, those habitual responses. Hands down by your sides. Turn the palms of your hands forwards. Bird folds its wings. This time you're forwards, change into fisherman cast a net. As you go into the front, hips sink down, shoulders drop. Feel your back lengthening as a result. Remember from the earlier exercise, back lengthen out. Your hips drop back. The letting go is also letting go of the tightness, the stiffness that may be there in your back, but also of an aim that says, right, I'm going to really go for it this time. The approach in Tai Chi is always very different. It's more a sense of, you know, we're cultivating these movements. We want to move further, we want the back to extend, but we're not forcing it on our bodies. Learn to recognize the signs from your body that you stop letting go, or where you stop letting go. And then coming over, you may also begin to recognize why you're doing that. Often there's not a good reason, actually. It's just an old habit that you picked up somewhere. Sometimes I find myself doing something thinking, why did I do that? I don't need to do that. But sometimes it might be that we, you know, our thoughts have drifted off and we're thinking about something, and maybe that thought is, maybe it's a memory that causes to tighten up or something like that. So your body begins to tell you when you you've lost that focus of attention. And through that process of letting go, how we bring that attention back. And then turn your hands palm. If that sounds like an easy operation, then don't let me kid you. If say, I don't know, maybe you've had an argument with somebody, a row with a friend or something like that, and things like that leave us with these thoughts going round and round in our mind. I wish I'd said this. I wish I hadn't said that. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should stop doing that, or whatever. You let that go. You think, oh, that's nice. And then half a minute later, you're back on that same thought track because it's something that's preoccupying you. And we go through the same process again. It's not a failure when you have to do that. Once again, bringing your attention back. Feel your weight going into your hips. Feel that point of punctuation that I've been talking about. And then into your feet. Once again, slowing down the movement. And in those moments, that's when we find that we're more likely to be able to let go, to release, soften. One more time. Pushing wave. So we want to find a balance, don't we, between wanting to progress in one way or another, but not pushing too hard. Not always thinking, I must progress, I must progress, I must progress. And this is where the term cultivation becomes important, I think. We want to find a balance between being able to extend out maybe a little bit further, but not losing that connection to our hips, not losing that sense of the root. One more time. Hands fisted, loosely fisted. Rotating as you go forwards and backwards. No more than the point where your palm down here at the forward position and palm up in the top position. Don't try and turn out any further. Don't try to just go to there. And feel the smoothness of the movement and right back through your arm into your shoulders. If you tighten up, so if you tighten your grip or if you turn too far, you'll lose that spaciousness in your shoulders. One more time. Release your fingers, winding back. Now polishing the table. Back to the center. Turn your hands palm up. Pushing up. Yeah. I've talked quite a lot about pushing down through feet and hips. Just try something. Try sort of bringing those two aspects together. I'm going to exaggerate. Watch my foot. I push down through the ball of my foot. My heel comes off the ground, and then I push down into my hips, and then everything lowers down. You push down through the ball of your foot, down to your hips. It's like the push from the foot comes up through your legs into your hips. Allows the hips to push down. But I am exaggerating, not this big a movement. You might want to try it big a few times. The order is going to be feet and hips. Feel the lengthening through your back, and then sink into your hips and let your heels come down. But in fact, ideally, that would be done without you actually having to push your heel off the ground. Still a gentle push through the ball of your foot. And then the wild goose. So the thing that we're letting go of here is too much emphasis on arms and shoulders. I think a principal area for that letting go physically, but also part of the dominant view that we have of ourselves is the letting go of that and returning our attention to hips, belly, waist, letting go of the urge to do something more than we're already doing, something extra somehow with our arms and hands. Heart in the clouds. This change of view, this change of perspective, I think is one of the most valuable things in Tai Chi, because it's really talking about changing our responses in all sorts of areas of our lives, giving us a different perspective. And that's not necessarily to say that it's always right, but I have to say my experience generally is. But that's obviously something that we work out for ourselves. Just as we change our perspective on how we respond to gravity. So there's that potential for a different view. And that requires a certain amount of letting go of the old view. and then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. One more on each side. And changing. It can be very, very hard to let go of those old habits. And one of the things to realize about them is, however much we think that they may be holding us back right now, they are part of what's got us to where we are right now. So we want to try not to build up a sort of resentment of them. We try not to get frustrated at them. You know, uncomfortable though it may be, and perhaps more than uncomfortable for some people, but biting your fingernails may not be the best possible response to stress. It's a good deal better than many people's responses to stress. It doesn't mean that we don't want to change it, but we can respect it for what it's done, I suppose you could say. One more round. And then scooping the sea, looking at the sky. And grasping the tiger's ears. Notice how you've rolled your fingers around. Have you gripped tight? It's quite a natural thing to do, by the way. Yeah, you're holding the baby. It will often grip your finger or something like that quite tightly. So again, it's not that it doesn't have its use or its value. It's just it's not something that is useful now. Changing sides. Another thing is, you know, when we're doing particularly more complicated movements, sometimes we make a mistake. And, oh no, I've got it wrong. That doesn't help. But, oh, I've got that wrong. Yeah. Everybody gets things wrong. And then grasping the tiger's ears. One more time. One of the interesting things about teaching something like Tai Chi is that we get to see the mistakes that are commonly made. And one of the most common errors I find that we all do, really, is putting too much emphasis on arms and upper body. And we don't always realize how much that actually hampers our development in the art. A really good example, we'll do this in a moment, but just watch for the moment, is part the wild horse's mane. This is the starting position. Left hand is palm down, right hand is palm up. I go into the movement and nothing has changed in terms of the orientation of the palms of the hand. I come back and I do nothing with the arms at all. I totally let go. Then I do this. I turn the hands palm in. I maintain the position of the arms and I move across. And then we're going to go into on the other side. So why do we do this? Why is it I see people doing this and they'll go, oh, I need to do this. They'll rotate a hand, or they'll do something extra with the hand. The top hand goes from here to here. Nothing could be simpler, but people sort of go, oh, I've got to do something there. We come back. Again, it's very, very simple. You turn your hands in to hold the ball. So many people do this. And they'll add a movement in. And then they'll get to here and they'll say, oh, I can't do this. It doesn't feel right. And it's because we've added things in. It's a very interesting movement from that point of view, seeing how people's attention comes to the upper part of their body. And with that, an urge to do something more than they actually need to do. So bring your weight back into your right hip. Hold the ball with your right hand on top, your left hand underneath. You're going to go forwards into your left leg. Most of the time, your arms are very, very passive in this movement. So you may notice they're kind of twitching. They want to do something. Move across into your left, forwards into your right leg. Back into your hip. But notice in those moments when we do manage to let go of that urge, just what a lovely, lovely movement this is. Lovely in its simplicity as much as anything else. It's economy of movement. Do one more. Okay, and then rub your hands together. Tapping over your face again. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The other side. Upper part of the chest. Belly. And the legs. And then standing. So inevitably, particularly when we come to standing, if say for instance you got with a pain in your knees or something like that, it's a very natural response to tighten up around that area in an effort to protect it from further damage. That has some value in some circumstances. It's a very natural response. Pain is an indication of a potential threat apart from anything else. But of course, it's not in the long term. It's not particularly useful. But that very act of tightening up around your knees or your hips or whatever is the thing that will quite often make the pain worse. If I stand here and tighten my knees, suddenly all the weight of my body is bearing down on my knees. That's not a good thing for the knees to have happen to them. So they'll hurt. However, logically, it's not the right thing to do, but deep inside, it's going to be very, very difficult to get that sense of letting go. We understand the reasoning behind it, but we have to keep coming back to persuade ourselves. So feet parallel, just sinking down and pushing up. When I first started doing Tai Chi, I was having trouble with my knees. It wasn't because of the Tai Chi, it was because of cycling long distances. The tendons either side of my knee could be painful. And teachers kept saying to me, just relax, let go, and things like that. It's like, I can't. And over the years, I've learned, I started by focusing on one knee. And when I was doing an exercise like this, or the weight change, okay, soften. And now it's got to the point where sometimes the knees can be a bit the tendons can be a bit sort of painful, a bit achy. And I've learned to get that feeling of releasing, knowing that it allows my center of gravity to go below my knees, which is going to relieve pressure on the knees. There's other things as well. I have to think about the alignment of my knees, for instance, and so on and so forth. This is not some kind of miraculous panacea, and that's part of my objection really to the term, because people do seem to use it like that. Now bring your hands around, cradling the ball. Push up. We're going to do this as a sequence. So sinking down, and just at this point there's often an urge to rush. Oh, I'm going to do this. Again, we release, we let go of that urge to do that. And sometimes, not always, the next movement just occurs. So when we find ourselves struggling with something, often letting go is, in a sense, the answer to the problem. Again, it's not always going to work. There are other things involved as well. But we often can't find those other things until we've made that deliberate act to release, to let go. And if it doesn't work, so be it. It's not the end of the world when we make a mistake. And rather than thinking, well, I'm hopeless at this, I'm no good, I'm never going to get this, we let that go as well, and we start again, we try again. I have literally seen genuine Chinese grandmasters get things wrong. And the interesting thing is they just laugh about it. Oh, we got it wrong. Yeah, that happens sometimes. Okay, this is the last one. And shake out. This is not unique to things like Tai Chi and meditation, by the way. I'm sure you must have all had the experience of you're chatting to somebody and you'll say, oh yeah, I remember them. They were tall, they had dark hair, wore glasses. You can't quite remember the name. What do you say? It's on the tip of my tongue. And you say, oh, come to me in a moment. And then sort of like you say a few more words and suddenly it's like, Peter, that was it, Peter. You have to say it quickly. As soon as you stop trying, as soon as you stop striving for that name, quite often the name will come out. We talk about trying too hard for something. If you go to a town or someplace where you've been quite a lot, but you haven't been for a while, you get to the place and you're trying to find your way around, and it's like, just hold on a second, let me just, oh yeah, now I know where I am. You just need that space, those punctuation points. So this concept of releasing, of letting go, is very much related to those. Now, have one foot forwards. The Chinese term is sung, S-U-N-G. And like all these, well, like all words really in all languages, well, certainly in our language, the meaning of a word, the precise meaning of a word, is very related to the context that we're using it in. So that's one thing to bear in mind. In terms of the Chinese language, we're talking about the characters, almost like pictures. So they can have a multiple range of meanings. So all sorts of things are wrapped up in this quality of sung, including the concept of letting go. One element, apparently, I'm no expert on this, by the way, but one element of sung shows a tree standing up straight. And there's also hair hanging down. It's an interesting combination of images, if you think about it. So we just take that moment, we punctuate the movement. We don't break the flow of it, but we just remind ourselves every time the weight shifts. I get to hear, it doesn't feel quite right. Now it does. And that just becomes instinctive over the years of practice. Then we start to raise our toes and our heel. We begin to find out. Sometimes you'll see me do this, I'm like, I didn't let go. So I'm talking to a class, and there's a little wobble. It's like, oh dear, I've lost that focus of attention that enables me to spot that moment when the releasing, the letting go is appropriate. And then stepping in. And shake out. I was talking after a class to somebody the other week. There's somebody who's had a lot of issues to deal with physically in their life, and they were standing there chatting to me, and as they were standing, they were like that. And I said, "What are you holding on to?" And they went, "Oh yeah." Carried on chatting. Suddenly they're standing there like that. I said, "Doing it again." They went, "Oh yeah, I know, yeah." And suddenly it's like that. So, oh, doing it again, kind of thing. This is very common. We all do this somewhere or another. Have your other foot forwards, transferring your weight. The person didn't need to do that, but at some time in their life they did. I mean, it may have been at that point, maybe there was a better strategy in theory, but in practice it wasn't there in front of them. So that was what they needed. So again, we want to try and respect that without actually accepting it. Well, no, not accepting it, without actually condoning it in a sense. It's okay, served me up until now, don't need you anymore, bye-bye sort of thing. Raising your toes and your heel. Stepping in. I learned that when I wobble around, I can let go, I'm less likely to fall over. And then stepping through. learned that this doesn't help, but this is a much surer bet. It doesn't work every time. And then in the other direction. Fisherman castanet, right foot forwards. And then sink back and turn. Rather than thinking, what am I going to do with my hands? Observe the movement. As it reaches the top of the movement, you come forwards. You turn, that moves your arms, they naturally swing in a circle, and what goes up must come down. Always remembering, we're never going to want to get to a point where there's a strain in the body. So we don't have to think, what do I do now with my arms? Because our arms are doing it. They're swinging up, they're not going to go too far. We reach the top and then we simply go forwards. In turn, we observe the arms. When they reach the top of the circle, we go back. So on the other side, fisherman castanet. And then the figure of 8. I had a great deal of difficulty doing this when I was doing the filming for the DVD that I was involved for the hospital project I've been talking to people about. And mostly it was about not moving my arms too far. You'll see here at some point, my fingers are disappearing out of screen. That really wasn't acceptable. And it was quite difficult. I had to think about what my hands were doing rather than feel it. I had to think about it in external terms. And when I started doing the walking, it was quite funny because if we now go to take a step, I'm fine at doing this. I enjoy this. But if I'd been doing that particular filming, I'd have got to here and I'd have been thinking, oh, what do I do with my head? And I'd have started wobbling around as I just had doing. Because suddenly I could no longer rely on that inner awareness. And I lost the route. I lost the stillness. It was a distraction. And then it was a distraction that I wasn't used to. I'm used to distractions of all sorts, but I'm used to not being distracted by them, to letting them go. Whereas this one was quite difficult to let it. I got it eventually, but it was one of the hardest parts of the filming for me. And go back to your chair. All of these things are important elements in Tai Chi, and there's a danger to isolating them, because Tai Chi is about balance and harmony of different elements. But on the other hand, focusing on something can be quite useful. Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain really focuses on this sense of return. When we let go of something, we're able to return whatever is drawing our attention out there, whether it be that stiff shoulder or that, that difficult conversation with a friend, or the news bulletin last night, or I don't know. I could go on forever, couldn't I, with the list of things that draw our attention out. Many of them are very positive. They're to do with our lives and important things to us, but we don't want to be out there totally. We want to get that sense of return. So Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain really emphasizes that key aspect of the form and the movements. And what I find is, whether I'm seated or whether I'm standing, at this point, I always seem to have the capacity to let go a little bit more in my hips. And it's that which draws my hands around and in. I could get depressed about that. I think, oh no, not again, my hips. Except that actually it's quite welcome, because I can get to here and it's like, ah, good, my hips have tightened up. Now I can release them, and that will bring my arms in for me. So this teaches us. When you have a teacher in front of you, it can be very irritating. My teacher said, "We're doing that again, Mike," and I'm like, "Really? Okay, I'll try to stop doing it." You're still doing it. Yeah, okay. But of course, that's the job of the teachers. One more time. And rest. Lovely. So thank you very much again, everybody, as always. Hope that was again interesting for you.